I fear not the dark itself, but what may lurk within it. Welcome to Lurk, bringing you creepy, strange, and bone-chilling stories, with your host, Jamie Jackson.
Hey Lurkers, I'm back. Sorry for the long hiatus. However, sometimes you just have to take a mental health break. Lots of things going on. Traveling back and forth to Virginia. And just a lot. So anyway, welcome back to another eerie stretch of our Haunted Trail series. If you're just tuning in, this is where we uncover the strange and paranormal stories from along the Appalachian National Scenic Trail. More than 2,190 miles of rugged wilderness and haunted legend winding through 14 states. Just so you know, there are two ways to say Appalachian. If you are above the Mason-Dixon line, it's Appalachian. If you are below the Mason-Dixon line, it is typically Appalachian. Both are correct. However, I will say Appalachian is technically the most correct pronunciation of the word. But I grew up with Appalachian, and that's what you're going to get. So we've already trekked through Georgia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, and New Hampshire. So if you missed those, be sure to go back and catch up. They can be listened to out of order, so you don't need to catch up before listening to this episode. Thousands set out each year to hike the Appalachian Trail from start to finish, but only a fraction ever actually make it all the way to the end. And today, sadly, we have reached that end. Maine. The final 270 miles of the Appalachian Trail. This isn't a victory lap. For many hikers, Maine is the hardest state on the entire trail. The terrain is relentless, with steep climbs, endless routes and boulders, and river crossings with no bridges. And then there's the 100-mile wilderness, one of the most remote stretches of trail anywhere in the United States. There are no towns, no resupply points, and no easy way out. Once you enter, you're committed. Cell service disappears, the woods grow thicker, the silence gets heavier. And some hikers say something about Maine just feels different. Like it's older, quieter, and far less empty than it should be. We've been following the stories northbound, and tonight we step into the final and most unsettling miles of the Appalachian Trail. So let's get lurking. As you cross from New Hampshire into Maine, the trail wastes no time. You're immediately met with one of the most infamous sections of the entire Appalachian Trail, Mahoosic Notch. Often called the toughest mile on the AT, it's not really a trail at all. It's a maze of massive boulders, stacked and scattered like something tore the mountain apart. Hikers climb, crawl, and squeeze through tight crevices where sunlight barely reaches. Even in the middle of summer, ice lingers beneath the rocks. But it's not just the terrain that unsettles people here. Hikers report sudden drops in temperature that don't match the weather, like cold pockets that seem to move. Others describe hearing low growls echoing through the rocks, sounds that don't belong to any known animal. And when the fog rolls in, it becomes almost impossible to tell where the trail ends and the void begins. One hiker described it like this: "It felt like I wasn't walking through rocks. It felt like I was inside something." Just beyond the notch, the trail climbs toward Old Speck Mountain, one of the first major peaks in Maine. A group of hikers once made their way up this mountain together. At some point, One man walked ahead and disappeared briefly around a bend. When the others caught up with him, he was standing completely still. His face was pale, and his body was shaking. He told them he had just seen someone standing in the trail. It was a figure dressed entirely in black, wearing long robes and a hood pulled low over its face. The figure spoke to him in a calm, clear voice that said, "Turn back." That was enough for the group. They didn't argue, just turned around and began heading down the mountain. Not long after, the weather changed and a sudden snowstorm rolled in, fast and violent. Visibility dropped to nothing. It was the kind of storm that would trap hikers on the mountain, or worse. If the group had continued on their hike, they likely wouldn't have made it back down. Northbound, Maine doesn't ease you in. It tightens around you. By the time hikers begin pushing toward Grafton Notch, the trail has already started to feel different, quieter, older. The kind of quiet that doesn't just sit in your ears, but presses in from all sides. It's the stretch where stories start to change, not the casual campfire kind, but the ones people tell a little softer, if they tell them at all. A few miles off the Appalachian Trail, beyond where most thru-hikers ever wander, sits Winan Mountain. It's not on the trail, not marked by the same steady stream of boots and blazes, but close enough that its presence lingers, like something just out of sight, keeping pace with you through the trees. Locals know it. Some hikers hear about it in passing, usually secondhand, usually late, after the fire has burned low and the woods feel just a little too still. Legend says that a woman named Catherine died on her wedding night. She was decapitated while wearing her wedding dress. Sometimes her headless ghost is seen on the mountain, and if you're traveling by car, you must offer her a ride or face being cursed. Further north, the Appalachian Trail passes directly through Grafton Notch State Park. The park is a beautiful area known for waterfalls, steep cliffs, and something else. In August of 2025, a couple was driving along Route 26 after a day of hiking. It was early afternoon, the sky was clear, and visibility was near perfect. As they drove, something stepped out of the woods. It was a massive figure covered in dark brown hair, walking upright. The creature crossed the road in front of them in just a few strides. The car ahead of them slammed on its brakes. Everyone saw it. The woman later said, "It moved like a person, but it was too big, too fast, and too smooth." She estimated that it stood at least 8 to 9 feet tall. They pulled over immediately and got out to search the area, but found nothing. There was no sound or movement, no sign that it had ever been there. Another account stated that a creature walked out of the woods standing about 7 to 8 feet tall and covered in reddish-brown hair. The creature's arms were extremely muscular, and it was seen bent down pushing a branch out of the way before it disappeared from view. Grafton Notch has long been considered a hotspot for Bigfoot sightings. Encounters like this continue to raise questions about what's really moving through those woods. As the trail continues toward Andover, it passes by Ellis Pond. Ellis Pond is a quiet stretch of water that's calm, still, and beautiful. Many hikers say this is where something changes and they begin to feel like they're being followed. They hear footsteps behind them that don't match their own. And they feel the sensation of something moving just out of sight along the shoreline. But when they turn around, there's nothing there. The feeling doesn't leave when they pass the pond. It stays with them for miles. Further north, the trail moves into a more remote stretch near Black Brook Notch. Hidden in this area is a place known as Devil's Den. Not to be confused with Devil's Den of Gettysburg fame, this one is a deep chasm carved into the earth. At one time, water poured into it before carving a new path. Now it sits quiet and still, but not empty. Campers nearby report hearing strange sounds at night that are low, echoing, and unidentifiable. It's not the wind or animals, but something else entirely. Some believe the area is haunted. Others believe something lives down there, something that has no intention of being found. As the trail climbs into the Bigelow Range, the terrain becomes more exposed. The elevations get higher and offer sweeping views. But it also offers a sense of vulnerability. Below the mountains lies Flagstaff Lake. Flagstaff Lake was a smaller natural lake until 1950, when the Log Falls Dam impounded the dead river, enlarging the lake and turning it into a reservoir used for hydropower electricity production by regulating the flow of the dead river into the Kennebec River. When the dam was built, one man refused to leave his home when the area was flooded to create it. Legend says that he died there, but he never left. Years later, a witness reported seeing something strange just above the water. There were 3 or 4 glowing orbs, each a different color, about the size of a dinner plate, floating slowly. As they watched, the orbs moved closer and closer to them until they were right at eye level, as though watching them. Then they simply vanished. Strange lights like these have been reported here for decades. Near Poplar Ridge Lean-To, the trail passes through one of the most sobering locations in Maine. In 2013, a hiker named Geraldine Inchworm Largay stepped off the trail briefly and never found her way back. She survived for nearly a month in the wilderness, leaving behind journal entries as she waited for rescue. Her final message asked that her husband be notified when she was found. Search teams looked for weeks, but she wasn't discovered until 2 years later, less than 2 miles from safety. Out here, even a small mistake can become fatal. Further north, near Pierce Pond, one hiker experienced something he just couldn't explain. Sitting by a campfire one night, he noticed a figure walking just beyond the firelight. It looked like a man with fishing gear walking calmly and silently. But then he just faded completely away. The next night, whatever it was came back. Only this time, it stopped and turned and stared directly at him. Needless to say, the hiker didn't stay. He left immediately and didn't return until morning. Before entering the 100-mile wilderness, hikers passed through the small town of Monson. This is the last real chance to rest, resupply, and prepare, because once you leave Monson, there's nothing ahead but forest. It's here that one group of hikers reported hearing a woman's voice on the trail. She spoke as if stepping aside to let them pass. They thanked her, stepped forward, and realized there was no one there. The 100-mile wilderness is one of the most isolated sections of the Appalachian Trail. There are no towns and no roads for long stretches, just dense forest in every direction. This is where many hikers say the trail feels different, almost heavier. Stories from this stretch include strange voices in the woods, phantom footsteps, and creatures that don't quite match anything that anyone knows. There's a point in northern Maine where the Appalachian Trail stops feeling like a straight line forward and starts feeling like a network of decisions. Deep in the 100-mile wilderness just east of Monson, a lot of thru hikers make one of those decisions almost instinctively. They step off the main trail for a side trip that has become something of a tradition. It's a spur route that leads to Gulf Hagas. On paper, it's optional, a detour, a break from the miles. But in practice, it's one of the most popular off-trail excursions in this section of Maine. The approach is quiet, almost understated. No big warning signs, no dramatic threshold. Just a gradual shift as the forest tightens and the ground starts to slope toward water you can hear before you ever see it. And then, the gorge reveals itself. Gulf Hagas isn't just a single overlook or a quick photo stop. It's a maze of narrow canyon walls, cascades, and rushing water carved deep into the rock. It's often referred to as the Grand Canyon of the East. Once you're in it, the world changes scale. The trees disappear above you, the sound compresses, even conversation feels swallowed before it can travel. Hikers who take the spur trail often talk about it afterward like it was a separate experience from the AT itself, something tacked onto the journey, but not quite part of it. A place where time feels less linear and the forest feels older than the path that brought you there. And maybe that's why so many people still take the detour. The 3-mile-long gorge was used by loggers to move logs to provide fuel for smelting operations at Katahdin Ironworks. Native Americans lived along the gorge. Burials of the red paint people have been found in the area, and the red ochre found in the soil was used on tools, skin, and during burials that date back 7,500 years. One story from the area involves a man by the name of Simon Garfield, who hunted and fished in the gorge each year with his dog. One fall he went hunting, but never returned. A storm filled the gorge, and all that was left of Simon was his dog. Many people tried to catch the dog, but he eluded capture. Today, that dog is sometimes seen walking along the gorge. In a stretch of trail defined by endurance and forward motion, Gulf Hagas is one of the few places where hikers willingly step sideways just to see what the land looks like when the trail stops being the only thing guiding them. On Chairback Mountain, there are reports of something called the specter moose. It's a massive animal standing 15 feet high and weighing around 2,000 pounds, far larger than any normal moose with pale, almost glowing fur. It has a large set of antlers with a spread of about 10 feet and sporting over 20 points, an acute sense of smell, and keen hearing. Witnesses say it can appear and disappear and even pass through solid objects. The animal can't be taken down by hunters as the bullets seem to pass straight through it. It doesn't attack, it just watches. By the time hikers reach western Maine, the Appalachian Trail has already stopped feeling predictable. The miles don't line up neatly anymore. The woods feel older, the silence heavier, and even the map starts to feel like something you're only loosely following. Somewhere beyond the deeper stretches of the 100-mile wilderness, after places like Gulf Hagas and the long ridgelines that lead north, the trail begins to funnel hikers toward a quiet, unassuming bend in the landscape. And that's where you reach Karatunk. There isn't much there at first glance, just forest, river, and the kind of stillness that makes you check your footing a little more often than you should. But Karatunk matters in a way that isn't immediately obvious on arrival, because here the Kennebec River cuts directly across the path of the Appalachian Trail, wide, cold, and moving fast. In Karatunk, hikers must use a canoe ferry to cross the river, and it's the only official ferry crossing on the entire Appalachian Trail. It also marks the psychological threshold into northern Maine's more isolated terrain. The Kennebec River was traveled by the Wabanaki Indians via canoe, but it needed to be connected by portages or overland paths from one river's headwaters to another. Laying out the paths wasn't easy. It needed to be done by someone with excellent sense of direction. The great Chief Waban was able to find his way through the wilderness without getting lost because he was able to talk to birds. The birds would fly high enough to spot landmarks, then fly ahead leading Waban. This allowed Waban to make trails with ease thanks to the birds. He claimed that he had such great powers that he was immortal. Legend says that he still walks the forest, clearing paths and helping lost hikers. Just south of Mount Katahdin, where the Appalachian Trail finally reaches its end, sits the small logging town of Millinocket. For through hikers, it's more than a dot on the map. It's the last place the trail still feels connected to the outside world. a place for resupply boxes, motel rooms, and a brief return to pavement before stepping into the 100-mile wilderness or making the final climb to Katahdin. But there's a strange quiet to Millinocket too, the kind that settles in after the hikers move on, when the season thins out and the mountains start to feel closer than the town itself. It's not the wilderness yet, but it's no longer fully removed from it either. For many, it's the last stop where the line between civilization and the deep woods still feels visible. And in places like that, where the woods press close and history lingers in the margins, stories have a way of sticking. Not the kind written down in guidebooks or trail logs, but the quieter ones, the ones passed along in low voices, half warning and half memory. In Millinocket, one of these stories has a name. They call her the White Lady. In the 1940s or 50s, a bride and groom were returning from their honeymoon, driving along Brownville Road. Their car went off the road, went down an embankment, and into a ditch. The groom told his wife to stay in the car while he went to get help to get out of the ditch. When he returned, his wife was gone. She was never found. Well, never found alive. Her ghost is seen walking along the road dressed in white when the weather is foggy or misty. Millinocket has also been the scene of a UFO sighting. In February 2009, two brothers were hauling firewood when they saw a low-flying yellow light about 50 feet above the trees. The object was shining a light on the ground, then it turned into 3 red lights forming a triangle. The two men went to camp and then returned to see a single red light that seemed to follow them. Then 2 more lights joined the first, and the men seemed to be surrounded by the lights. Then their ATV shut off, and the engine refused to restart. They eventually got the engine started, and the lights moved at a speed of 10 to 15 miles per hour, shooting up to 200 feet high before disappearing. The lights never made a sound. There's another legend from the Maine wilderness about a magic axe. I said axe, not ass. There was a logger known for his laziness, drinking, and fighting, and he also enjoyed seducing the wives and daughters of the other loggers. You know, real stand-up guy. His antics caught the attention of Satan, who appeared to the man one night. Satan offered the logger a magic axe. All the logger needed to do was whistle a happy tune, and the axe would do all the work. This would allow the logger more energy and time for his fighting and debauchery, things Satan wanted to see more of. The logger took the axe and whistled a tune, and it worked. While the logger sat under a tree whistling, the axe cut down tree after tree. The extra wages the logger earned were spent in the saloon and setting up the logger and his friends in a life of drunkenness. As he aged, however, the logger began to grow concerned for his afterlife, but before he could change, he was found in the woods beheaded. The axe was never found. On moonless nights, though, the axe can be heard cutting trees all by itself, if someone nearby is whistling. So watch where and when you whistle a merry tune in the woods. Out in the deep woods of the north, long before trails were blazed and maps were reliable, the logging camps developed their own kind of folklore. Stories passed from bunkhouse to bunkhouse, warnings, superstitions, and things no one could quite explain. Some of these tales were meant to keep men cautious. Others may have come from something far older. They spoke of gray jays, small watchful birds that followed loggers through the forest, always nearby and always waiting. The men swore the birds were more than just opportunists stealing scraps of food. They believed the gray jays were the spirits of dead woodsmen, returned to linger in the place that killed them. Because of that, no logger would ever harm one. Then there was the white owl. If a white owl burst from a tree marked for cutting, work stopped immediately. No questions, no arguments. The crew would pack up and leave that section of forest behind. Because the owl wasn't just an animal, it was believed to be a ghost, and if you ignored the warning, it wouldn't stay in the trees. Not all of these stories were quiet warnings. Some were far more violent, like the legend of Razor Shins. Razor Shins is an immortal, human-like figure with shin bones sharpened like blades and an unquenchable thirst for liquor. You thought I was going to say blood, didn't you? No, liquor. Loggers were told to leave a jug of whiskey outside their camp door on the night of a full moon. If the jug was empty by morning, it meant Razor Shins had passed through, and sometimes, as a strange reward, he'd fell a tree for the man who left it. But if no offering was made, men disappeared. And when they were eventually found, they were found scalped and mutilated. Further north, in the stillness of the woods, loggers feared something smaller, but no less disturbing. The Willamalones were strange, squirrel-like creatures that gather poisonous lichen, rolling it into tight little balls. While men slept, the creatures would drop them into ears, onto eyelids, basically anywhere that they could. The result wasn't an immediate death. It was something slower. The victim would suffer from headaches, visions, and hallucinations that blurred the line between dream and reality, until a man couldn't trust what he was seeing in the woods anymore. And then there was something darker, something older, the Wendigo. The Wendigo is described as a massive, shadowy figure moving silently through the snow-covered forest. Its voice is like the sound of the wind moaning through pine trees. Most never see it directly, they only find the tracks. The footprints are 2 feet long, with a strange red stain in the center, as if blood seeps through its moccasins with every step. And according to legend, if you do see it, it's already too late. Not everything in these woods hides in silence. Some things call out to you. The dingball is said to resemble a cougar, but it's wrong in all the ways that matter. Its tail is twice the length of its body, ending in a hard, ball-like joint, bare of fur and flesh. And it doesn't just hunt, it lures. At night it sings in a human voice, calling from just beyond the firelight, and when someone steps outside to answer, that's when it strikes. They couldn't come up with a better name than Dingball, because that is not terrifying at all. It's like Dingle or Dingbat, Dingball. And now I want to sing the song My Dingling, but I'll refrain. Other stories from the Maine woods speak of transformation, of what happens when a person crosses a line they can't come back from. The Jiwaka were once human, or so the stories say, but something changed them, specifically possession by evil spirits, or the commission of a terrible crime like cannibalism, or even the act of denying food to someone who was starving. Their crimes caused their hearts to turn to ice, and they are forever cursed to roam the woods as giants, hunting, feeding, never satisfied. Not all the forest spirits are hostile, though. The Mikamwasas are described as small, human-like beings, standing only as tall as a man's waist. They are curious, playful, and sometimes helpful. But like many things in the wilderness, respect is everything. Those who mock or anger them quickly learn that even the smallest creature can be dangerous. And I just want to point out, throughout all the different Native American legends, I have discussed many different variations of small, human-like people who live in the woods. And then there are the legends that feel almost too human. Like the Jug Woman. The Jug Woman is a squat, twisted figure, something between a witch and a warning. She steals infants, raising them as her own, but she doesn't always appear as herself. She can change her shape, even take the form of a man, which means you might not realize who or what you're dealing with until it's far too late. And then some of the creatures don't stay in the woods at all. They wait beneath the surface. The Giddiscog is said to lurk in lakes and rivers, a massive horned serpent capable of pulling a person under without a trace. There have been stories, recent ones even, of enormous shedskins found along riverbanks, enough to make you wonder if something is still down there. And finally, one of the strangest reports of all is the story of the white Bigfoot. Just like a typical Bigfoot, the white Bigfoot is a towering bipedal creature seen moving silently through the Maine woods, only it's white. In one account, a boy spotted it near the family's property. He heard something first, a strange, unnatural sound. Then he saw it, large, white, fast, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. When his family searched the area, they didn't find the creature, but they did find signs that it had been there. There was a deer, torn apart, one leg ripped clean from the body, and massive footprints. The creature is said to be 8 feet tall, at least 8 feet tall. Whatever these stories are, warnings, myths, or something rooted in truth, they all point to the same idea. The woods were never empty, and maybe they still aren't. At the northern end of the wilderness lies Baxter State Park, a place with strict rules and limited access, and no towns. No easy exits, and no room for mistakes. This is the final stretch, and it leads to one place, Mount Katahdin, the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. And if there's one place where all of these stories seem to converge, one place where the line between the natural and the supernatural feels especially thin, it's Mount Katahdin. Rising out of the wilderness like something ancient and unmoving, Mount Katahdin has always carried a reputation that goes beyond its height or its beauty. Long before it became the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail, it was known as a place of power. To the Penobscot Nation, this mountain wasn't just land, it was sacred, and it was feared. According to Penobscot tradition, the mountain is home to a powerful entity known as Pamola. Pamola is not quite human and not quite an animal, described as part man, part moose, and part eagle. It's something far more dangerous, a being said to control the weather, capable of stirring up violent storms without warning, and guards the mountain from those who didn't belong. For generations, people avoided climbing it, not because it was difficult, but because they believed they weren't supposed to. And even now, with marked trails and thousands of hikers reaching its summit every year, there are still those who say the mountain hasn't changed, that it still watches, that it still decides who will make it to the top and who doesn't. Hikers report sudden, violent weather changes, clear skies turning into storms within minutes. They hear voices carried on the wind and strange footsteps behind them when no one is there. Pamola is said to punish those who disrespect the mountain, and many who reach the summit leave with the feeling that something was watching them the entire time. As long as Pamola isn't antagonized, most people are safe. A group of Boy Scouts claimed to have encountered Pamola and said he had reddish hair and a rotten egg smell. Sounds delightful. That's a wrap on our trek through Maine's stretch of the Haunted Trail. From the crushing boulders of Mahoosic Notch, to the isolation of the 100-mile wilderness, to the towering presence of Mount Katahdin. This final section of the Appalachian Trail is unlike anything else. It's not just the terrain, it's not just the danger. There's something about Maine that feels untouched, ancient, and aware. Got a paranormal story of your own? Share it at lurkpodcast.com, where you'll also find our blog, team info, and newsletter sign up. I know I haven't done the newsletter, I don't even know how long. Maybe a year. Promise I'm getting back to that. Don't forget that you can catch us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, or anywhere podcasts lurk. If this episode sent a chill down your spine, leave a 5-star review and share it with a friend. Or maybe tell the story around a campfire, if you dare. Until next time, keep your lantern close, watch the trail signs carefully, and most of all, keep lurking.